Of course, today we are working with the energy or looking at the energy of Leto, Latona, which is the mother of Apollo and Artemis. And I'll talk about the symbolism of that because it's very interesting. And I'll also go into a little bit, why, and being in Europe again also just reminded me of, why these archetypes, why these gods and goddesses are so important. It's because they kind of hold a template for us in our lives, not only personally but collectively. It's kind of like a template to aspire to, and it's kind of almost like a golden age or a golden vision that we can hold, for ourselves, for our own lives, for a more collective experience as well. So I'll touch on some of those aspects later, but we'll start off with 20 breaths. And that of course is 4 short breaths, 1 long breath times 4, and then afterwards just keep your eyes closed. Long deep breath through the nose, 4 short, long, and 5 more. And now you can just exhale, keep your eyes closed, relax. But as you relax, just feel your body as it is. The theme of today's session is very much about grounding the light of the divine into the body. So just feel your body and just feel it as it is without trying to change anything. So if you're feeling down, just feel that. If you're feeling elated or happy, feel that for what it is. Don't try to change or censor what your body's saying. Just let that be a little bit. And now let go by taking another long deep breath. And as you do so, just allow your body to become balanced, just dropping any of those imbalances so that you can be here, present in this moment now. And as you become more present with your body and yourself in this moment, just feel your emotions. Perhaps they're emotions from earlier on today or yesterday that are sitting with you. Just let them go now. There might be things that need to be resolved, but let that happen later. The same goes for your mind. Just let thoughts fall away, to become silent as you open more to your soul, your higher self, as you open to who you really are. Just connecting to your truth, your true essence. And as you continue now, as you stay in this inner focused state, just really open yourself up more to your soul. That soul aspect of you is a divine spark. It's the aspect of you that connects you to God, Goddess, all that is. But if God is vast and measureless, your soul is your personal connection to the divine. So just expand out of your thoughts, out of your ego, out of your body, a little bit more into your soul perspective, which is beyond your thoughts, which is beyond your identity and who you think you are, which is beyond any definitions that you might have here on earth of yourself. But of course your soul is recognizable, it's an aspect of you. So maybe there's some timeless aspects of you that you recognize in your soul. Maybe it's the things that you love or the things that you're passionate about that you recognize there. These might be aspects that you've seen in your life already, or there may be aspects that are waiting to be born. So just be comfortable with your soul, with that higher aspect, even if you don't know what that means to be without definitions and thoughts of your ego. Just expand beyond. And now breathe in your soul, breathe in more consciousness and awareness of this higher aspect. And as you breathe this in, you're giving it more life, you're giving it body in your body, embodying more your soul. And that means connecting to the timeless, to the boundless you. So much more to you than you think. So much more to you than your past. So much more to you than your role in this illusion that we live in here in this world. Identify with that as you just find a great sense of peace in that not knowing, in that mystery. A great sense of peace. And perhaps, given that our theme for today is about birthing the miracle, just think about what it is that you need or what it is that you want in your life that will make a difference. Maybe something that seems out of reach or impossible. It could be something very material, it could be something very spiritual, an emotional state or a way of being. Just think of something that you really need to shift in your life. And just having that awareness of it now, perhaps just show this to your soul. You don't need to think about it or understand it, but just show what it is that you need to your soul, to the timeless, boundless you. And remember, when you live in this illusion, in this world of illusion, you can have as much of the illusion as you want. You can choose how you experience this illusion. So just show what it is that you need and desire. And there's nothing wrong with wanting or desiring in this world, in this Maya, this illusion, as long as we don't attach too much to it, as long as we don't obsess. So as you spend this time with your soul, as you spend this time with your desire, what's needed, just feel how within you you're opening, you're centered, you feel a strength, you feel a greater awareness, presence, also the presence of God, Goddess, almost as if they are looking in on this moment. And as they look in, they are blessing, opening the way. Be present in yourself, be present with your desire, be present with your soul, be present with the divine, God, Goddess, all that is. And just feel at ease in this place, in this presence, conscious, aware. Very good. And a little bit later on, we'll work further with this visualization. But for now, just be comfortable with who you are, where you are, with your desires, with your needs. And now you can just take a long, deep breath and return to the space by opening your eyes and being back. Good. So as always, we'll start off by drawing a card for today's session. We'll see what is in store for us in the next while. And what comes up is Tartaros, which is the god of the deep underworld. It's the god of actually the inferno of hell, but not the Christian conception of hell. It's more just the deepest place within ourselves, and that deepest place is usually, could have a negative aspect. And what that card speaks about is really looking at and examining how we are the creators of our own nightmares, how our fears hook us into particular behaviors and reactions, how just negative programming creates expectations of how we think things should be. And as you can see in this card, it is a card that has fire. It has lots of fire in it, and of course that fire relates to purification. So that card is about, first of all, being aware of the ways in which we create hell for ourselves, but then in that awareness coming, that spark of fire, that spark of awareness dissipates that energy, because ultimately everything that we do and experience in this life comes from some deep place, some deep expectation or some deep fear. Sometimes that is kind of, one could say, personally created, through our beliefs and our expectations. And other times it's kind of created by just the setup, the place that we inhabit in this matrix. It's kind of, it could be through our genes, it could be through our DNA, through the environment that we're born into, the place and the time that we're born into. So that also, of course, has a role. And I think this ties in very nicely with our theme today, because we're going to be talking about this idea of Leto, who gives birth to Apollo, the sun, and Artemis, the moon, and so much more than that. This myth is a myth of really, being open to giving birth to the miracles and allowing those miracles to happen. And I think usually the reason why the miracles don't happen in our lives is because we're not ready for them. Be that a so-called miracle or be that manifestation of some sort, it's because we're not ready. Maybe we haven't learned the previous lessons yet, or maybe we're resisting sort of just below the level, the threshold of awareness. Because, whenever we talk about manifestation, people always say, well, why would I want to be in an abusive relationship? Or why would I want to be alone? I don't want that. I know that I want a relationship. that's kind of at the point of consciousness and awareness up, that part that we think we know, but just below that threshold of consciousness, there's all those other patterns, all those beliefs, all those resistances that come in. So, I think something that's sort of, that I've been thinking about a lot and working with a lot recently is, yes, we all need to do our work on ourselves, of course, in our life, and we need to heal, and we need to go through the psychology, and we need to work through all that deep stuff. But there comes a point in our development, especially when people have done a lot of work, where, yes, you can endlessly dig. You can dig forever. You'll always find more traumas and more reasons why you should be unhappy, or why this, that, or the other shouldn't be working in your life. But there comes a time, I believe, once we've reached like a certain point, almost like a critical mass within ourselves, where we start to realize and say, okay, this isn't only about me and my pain and my trauma anymore. It now becomes, how do I integrate the divine more into my personality, into my daily life? It could, not always, but it could come to a point where, we become very self-indulgent of our pains and of our misery. And that becomes excuses for us as to why we're not, getting on with doing our bigger work and following our bigger vision. So, really connecting to higher purpose, potential, it's almost like a funnel, I think, it's almost like we as individuals are at this point here, where we've got the ego and where we've got the awareness. And then as we go up this funnel, as this funnel gets broader, we kind of start with, our soul, and then that goes up into the vastness of the divine that, is way beyond our comprehension. But our soul aspect is an aspect that we can understand, and it's a place that we can kind of expand our consciousness and awareness into, and it's a glimpse that we can get of what's beyond, so that we can then step into who it is that we really are, and what the real work is that we should be doing here. Again, beyond the ego's misery, and all the ego's distractions or the ego's joys. Again, I never reject the ego. I never say the ego is a bad thing or it should be killed. The ego is just like an animal that needs to be trained. So, an ego can have bad behavior, but we can show the ego better ways of surviving and functioning, and then we can kind of improve the ego's behavior. But we do need to actually go beyond the ego in order for that kind of training process to take place. And I think most people who've worked with me have experienced that in various different ways, be it through breath work or through other deep trance processes. It's that deep trance, it's that going beyond the ego where we really expand into something else, that we can bring that expanded state back and really put it into our bodies and let that change our lives, and again shift that critical mass out of ourselves, that, let's say, misery or those impurities or those toxins or whatever. We can shift out of that mass and reach a critical point where we can make it more about how we serve the divine, or how we live the divine in our lives, or how we further the divine in our lives. And this brings me to one of the points I also wanted to make. And this I really love mythology. I love all types of mythology, and the power of mythology and narrative. And on this trip to Europe, where I went to some very mythological places, I just realized again, the absolute power of a collective mythology. And a collective mythology usually is one that is connected to some sort of archetype of a higher place, a higher, in connection with a higher power. And, in many traditions that is known as the Golden Age. Many traditions talk about the Golden Age and how, since then there's been this descent into lower states of consciousness. And if you look at history, especially the great civilizations of history, many of them, most of them, always aspired to some sort of golden age or some sort of almost divine template that they sought to build. And in the particularly inspired times, they were able to almost replicate those golden eras in the physical world. But then slowly over time, sort of corruption and decadence set in, and then that kind of has fallen away and degraded. But the same goes for us as individuals. And I often talk about, our own personal potential, which again is integrally linked to our personal soul. So, when we're in alignment with our soul, it's almost like we expand into that golden potential, if you want to use that term, of who we really are, the light, the love potential of who we really are. And when we identify more and more with that mythology of the higher self, we can grow into it and aspire to it, as opposed to a mythology or a narrative that we might create about ourselves, of how broken we are, or how terrible our parents were, or how terrible society was. It's all mythology. It's all stories that we tell ourselves, that we empower with emotion, that we empower with our thoughts and with spending time on those mythologies. And mythology itself is neutral. But again, it's the belief and the energy we invest in those mythologies that make them real. So the lesson of that, of course, is to really look at what mythology you are creating for yourself, or what mythology are you living in your life now? Is it a mythology of brokenness? Is it a mythology of limbo? Is it a mythology of, okay, this is what I want to be, this is where I'm going, this is how I'm going to follow my potential? And again, that doesn't need to be only about manifesting things. It's really about manifesting a way of life and a quality of life and a quality of experience. And I'll talk a little bit about this myth of Leto, Apollo and Artemis, which is linked to that. And I think it kind of weaves that theme in quite nicely, because the myth kind of illustrates some of those principles. So that the basic myth is that Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, she was kind of a earth goddess, a mother goddess who caught the attention of Zeus. And of course, he, being the god of fertility, he impregnated her, and his wife Hera was very jealous, and she set out to punish Leto. But there was kind of a prophecy that the children that Leto would bear would be sort of great gods and goddesses. They would be bringers of great light into the world. And of course, that's Apollo, who represents many things, but one of them is the sun, and Artemis represents many things, but also the moon. So it's the sun and the moon. It's those two most powerful astronomical bodies that are in the heavens, in the skies. So in punishing Leto, Hera made every country and continent promise that they would not allow her, Leto, to give birth on their soil to these twins, these sort of twins of light. And therefore Leto had to sort of move around, and she was ungrounded, she was lost, she was frightened, until eventually she came upon the island of Delos, which was a floating island for whatever reason. And then Delos had not made that pact with Hera, meaning that she could give birth to these twins on Delos. And Delos is now, an island that exists. It's an incredible place. I went there a few years ago, and first and foremost, that was considered a holy island just because Apollo and Artemis were born there. So there are big sanctuaries there to them, obviously ruins now. But also Delos became sort of the Delian League, the capital of the Delian League, which at one point was a league of the whole Aegean Sea, and Athens was kind of the main player in that league, but it was immensely rich, and it's this tiny little island of, I don't even know how many square meters, but a very small island. You can walk around it, fully around it, in less than a day. And at one stage, it had something like 50,000 people living there, with these big sanctuaries and these holy places. So it was very important in the minds of the ancient people. And the how we bring this back now to the principle of giving birth to miracles in our lives is looking at a few of those elements that they represent. So here we've got the goddess Leto, who's the mother goddess, or the earth goddess, but she's not allowed to set foot on land anywhere to give birth to this miracle. And that for me has many interpretations. One of them being that we kind of can't give birth to a miracle or to something new when we are within a garden, a metaphorical garden of the familiar in our lives, or a garden that's already overgrown with lots of thoughts and ideas and emotions. It's almost like the miracle needs sort of open space and sort of recently turned soil in order for that miracle to grow and to be born. So it's very much about on the one hand this open space, this free space, but on the other hand it's also very much about being willing to go into the unknown, into the undefined. And again, that has many interpretations. We can still live our normal lives, we can still do our normal day-to-day things, but internally it's really important for us to open the space so that we can be open to new seeds growing in our lives. And that of course relates to our beliefs, that relates to our thoughts, but most importantly that seed can only be planted when it's really planted, and that means when it really goes into a very deep place in the body, in the subconscious mind. If there are other beliefs that get in the way, that seed won't be planted. And let's just use a simple example of let's say the miracle you want to create is a relationship or abundance. If you have many beliefs that say I don't deserve to have a relationship, or I don't deserve to have abundance, those beliefs are not going to allow that seed to land and therefore to germinate. So again, having that sort of visceral experience of what the miracle is, and that often comes in epiphany, or it comes in a dream, or it comes with a sense of a revelation of, oh wow, this is what I need to do, this is what's important in my life. And very often when we have these epiphanies, or when we have a conception of a miracle, it doesn't make sense. We don't know how we're going to make it happen because it just seems so impossible. These are, of course, when it's a miracle or something that you want to willfully create. Often miracles are things that just come in out of the blue. But I don't believe that it's ever just luck, or it ever just happens. It's something that on some level we're ready for, be it within ourselves, or be it in a bigger spiritual plan. So we have to be open to this newness, and that openness has to allow the seed to be planted without our other beliefs getting in the way. And that's very difficult, of course. We've got so many unconscious beliefs that we're not even aware of, that we don't even realize we have, so many resistances. And really the way to work through those is, of course, through our meditation, or through taking our meditation further always. Daily meditation practice is one thing, and then doing that work, doing those processes that take you further is another thing. And that, of course, relates to, I would say, deeply transformational processes, be that, again, breath work, or some other form of trance work, where we can shift the space, open the land, metaphorically speaking, so that seed can be planted. And it's much simpler and much easier than it may seem. There are many different ways of going very deep, and that could be through experiences with others, but it could also really be with committing within ourselves to making that change. And one of the simplest and most powerful, and in a way most difficult ways to do that is through fasting. If you don't have access to other ways of doing this deep work, fasting is one of the most powerful ways, because there you are literally opening the earth of your body by not eating in the normal way, and planting an intention through a fast. And I always say when you do a fast, you need to be aware of what your intention is, so that every time you feel hungry and every time that you resist eating, you say to yourself, why am I doing this? And then you remember, oh yes, it's because I'm planting this particular seed. So doing a 3-day fast or a week-long fast, or there's various different types of fasts, is one of the most powerful ways of planting the seed. But the process of planting the seed, and then of course covering over the soil, metaphorically speaking, that's kind of the hardest part, is letting it go, letting that energy germinate of itself without you getting in the way, without your ego and your doubts and your fears getting in the way. And I think that's where a second aspect of trance comes in, which is the letting go aspect. All cleaning, all purifying is ultimately letting go. It's a willingness to say, I'm not going to hold on to this stuff. I might have thought that I'm this, but I'm willing to redefine what I need, and just to be open to whatever needs to happen. And that process of purification, of letting go, is critical to any process of creating sort of miracles and shifts in our lives. Because it's not only about letting go of the intention and sort of saying, I hand it over to the divine, I trust that it's going to happen. It's also very much about not having an expectation, or not being in desperation of having this thing happen. Because when we're in an energy of fear or desperation, we're still holding on tight, and we're still preventing this miracle, this new thing to manifest into our lives. So it's really important always to bear in mind that we need to be very light about our intentions and prayers. They are very serious things, and they might take serious work to put into place, but we need to almost like create boundaries with ourselves, where we say, okay, I've done the work and now I let it go. I hand it over to the divine. And of course, the Camino is one of the beautiful ways of doing that, is because, for example, in the process that I run, you walk for 3 weeks towards Santiago, the holy city at the end of the Camino. And those 3 weeks are about that work and about putting in that effort and putting in that intention. But then there is a boundary where you say, as soon as I reach that city, as soon as I leave that city, my work is done, and I let go, and then I just allow the grace of God, Goddess, to come in and to open the way for me. So that's a very nice, clearly defined boundary. And again, in our own processing, we also need to have these boundaries, where we say, again, maybe if it's a fast, again, what's nice about a fast is you can say, I'm going to do 7 days. And at the end of those 7 days, during those 7 days, I'll do my processing, I'll do my planting of the seed. But at the end of those 7 days or 3 days, then I'm just going to let it go. And then the way that I feed that seed is through gratitude, because when we enter gratitude, we are watering the seed. We are saying, I'm no longer in the lack of this thing that I want. I am now owning it, acknowledging it, saying it's part of me, welcoming it in through my gratitude. So that act of gratitude becomes a process of claiming the miracle, again, the miracle or the manifested thing that we want in our lives. So this process is kind of reflected in those gods Apollo and Artemis. Apollo is the light, the sun, the reason, the rationality, the beauty, the abundance that the sun brings, of course, of the day. It's the active aspect of, during the day when the sun shines, make hay while the sun shines. There's certain activities that you need to do during the day. And then Artemis represents the other side, which is the moon, which is more fleeting. And, that moon surface that changes, given the reflection of the sun on the moon's surface, represents the emotions. It represents, the changing of the inner tides. And it also really represents the sort of intuition, the instinctual aspect. It's hard to see with the inner eye when it's daylight. So we use the inner eye when it's nighttime. And of course, the moon rules intuition. It rules that deeper instinctual aspect. And of course, both of those sides, Apollo and Artemis, have a positive aspect, and they also have a negative aspect. The excess of Apollo could be too much rationality, trying to figure it out too much with the rational mind, being too much in the light and getting scorched, or overburdened, tired. Too much of Artemis, of the moon, could be being too dreamy, being too much in one's inner world, and too much in those instincts coming up. And of course, the balance is between those two. The heat of the day is cooled by the night. The reason, rationality of the sun is balanced by the intuition of the moon, of Artemis. The activity of the sun is balanced by the letting go and the rest of the moon. So, to bring the balance between those two aspects within ourselves is so important. And those are two very specific strategies to work with when it comes to manifestation as well. It's the active, it's the putting in the energy, and then it's the allowing things to happen. And the power of those energies, of course, is that these two gods are twins. The twins separate because they have to express different aspects or different polarities, but then they also need to be integrated in order to create an alchemy. And the alchemy, of course, in this context is the light or the miracle, because the light, the purest light, is something that's beyond all creation. And the archetypes, the gods, goddesses, are beyond this human construction. And this is something I've been meditating on a lot. When I did the Camino, I walked with the energy of the sun, of Sol Invictus, of the sun that is reborn every day, and the light that represents. And one of the things that I really kind of realized was that the sun, the light, of course, is the source of everything. It's the source of all life. But it's also kind of, the sun is kind of this, the sun itself and the earth itself are kind of givens. They're kind of so true that they are kind of irrefutable. And what that means is, it's like the light of the sun is, and it's an inspiration. It's not subject to illusions or stories or anything else. It's just something that is. So it's one of those really pure elements that we experience in the world that can be a guiding light, in our spiritual path. The same goes for the earth. The earth is the earth itself, nature, the cycles of nature. They are kind of set. They are beyond the illusion that the human mind, the human mythology, the human narrative creates. Without those basics, we don't survive. Of course, then there are the elements of air and water as well, which are important, and the God element, which relates to the element of the sun. But when we go back to those absolute fundamentals we can kind of find a spirituality that's very grounded, that's not about dogma and philosophy and opinion. It's just very true. I think working with and meditating on something like the sun, something like the elements of nature, and how those then become transcendent, or how they become something more divine, then becomes a personal journey of discovery. And this kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning of the session, is that we all have our own hurts and our pains and our fears, which maybe at the time of their creation were valid and real, but we can't carry them around with us all the time. The sun rises every morning, and it brings the new light, it brings the new day, it brings a new promise. And that's kind of very forgiving in our lives, because it means that we can start over each day. It's not this sort of linear scientific or just general linear time model of we start and then we end, and we better not mess up along the way. With that rebirth of the cycles of the sun, day and night, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then going back to spring. It's cyclical, it's circular, so it gives space for forgiveness and renewal with the beginning of each cycle. And that, of course, is why in the different mythologies these new cycles and seasons were celebrated, because they always gave that promise of renewal, of a rebirth. And that rebirth, of course, is one of the most powerful spiritual principles that we have, because when we are reborn, we can fundamentally stay the same. We're still the same soul, we're still the same body, but with every rebirth or deep, visceral, transformational experience, we can become renewed, but renewed or reset more to who we really are, more to our greater potential, or our highest truth, or our soul truth. So, when we, going back to our theme of the miracles or the manifestation, when we throw off the stuff of the personality and we return back to that source of our soul, of who we really are, we're getting rid of the conditions that keep us out of living that potential, so that we can then sort of really thrive, and so that life can have flow. And I always say that in our lives, when we really seriously start doing work on ourselves spiritually, there should be flow in our lives. Doors should open, new ways should be shown, be that in terms of abundance or love, or how we feel in our day-to-day lives, or our family relations. There should be some opening and some flow and some indication that things are moving in the right direction. And that doesn't mean that everything's, that you're going to reach a point where everything is just, working, flowing perfectly. That probably will never happen, because there's always certain challenges or certain things that we need to work with or look at. But the general flow, that general principle of moving forward gracefully with kind of minimum effort is what's really important. So we'll do a little visualization now, just to ground in some of these principles, so that we can experience them on another level. And to do that, again, we'll just start off by closing our eyes. Let's just take a few long, deep breaths together now. Just take a few of these long, deep breaths as I speak. And now, just returning back to that place we were at in the visualization at the beginning of the session, where you became aware of a desire, of a thing you'd like to manifest, or a miracle that you need. Let's just call that your Holy Grail, that sacred, divine, spiritual thing or state or way that will bring change and joy into your life. So just imagine perhaps that you sit with this Holy Grail in front of you and feel how this Holy Grail emits a presence. Perhaps it emits a light or a force or a power that you feel just in front of you, a presence independent of you that you sense and feel affecting you. And of course, this Holy Grail is based in the love and the light of your highest good. It's based in goodness and truth. And the light of this Holy Grail acts like a filter that filters out any bad intentions or filters out any fears, any doubts or pains. So feel this Holy Grail presence, perhaps transforming and shifting, maybe even the theme or the state that you desire changes, or maybe it becomes clearer in some way. And now just visualize a flaming figure of light that walks towards you, like the sun personified, the light personified, coming towards you and standing in front of you. And in some traditions this is called Apollo or Inti or Sol or Helios, the sun, Apollo. And then another figure walks towards you, the moon, silver light. And this figure of the moon, of the intuition, stands next to the sun. So you have sun and moon before you, male and female, giving, receiving. And let these figures bless your Holy Grail. And this blessing may come in the form of your Holy Grail becoming more powerful and stronger, perhaps gentler and sweeter. But feel that this Holy Grail is being blessed, and breathe deeply to draw this energy into yourself, the energy of the sun and of the moon, the energy of the Holy Grail, breathing it into you. And as you breathe, you feel that this Holy Grail is reflected inside you, perhaps in your heart or your solar plexus or stomach, or any place that feels right. Just feel it's reflected in your body and breathe into that part of your body. And as you feed this inner grail with your breath, with your thoughts, you make space within yourself, within your life, for the growth of this grail. So breathe it in. Breathe it in so that it becomes familiar, so that it becomes a part of you, so that it becomes integral. And now give thanks to the sun and the moon as they part. And see now that the Holy Grail in front of you starts to grow in size, to expand. Expanding in such a way as to encompass you, your body, your being. Breathe. To feel that. So you're in the glow, in the aura of this Grail, miracle, manifestation, mystery. You're surrounded by that, inside it, and it keeps expanding and growing in size until it becomes so big, so vast that you no longer can see or sense it outside of you. You're inside it. But deep inside of you, in that reflected aspect of the Grail, you feel its power working. So breathe into that power internally. Externally, it expands and encompasses more and more energy. It grows outside as well as inside. And now just let it go. As it keeps growing, as you can no longer track it, let this symbolize the letting go so that you can allow God, Goddess to take care of the details. And also trusting that the seed is planted within. And so be it, let it be. And now take another long deep breath as you start to return. Opening your eyes. Good. So of course this very simple process is something that you can repeat. I always suggest that when you, as I said before, when you do this sort of work, do it for a few days or a few weeks, with focus and intention and intensity, and then come to a point where you let it go and release it and say, now I'm in the receiving mode. And you can even define, a period. Let's say you do 3 weeks of putting in the energy, then do 3 weeks of just actively, or not actively, but just allowing yourself to receive it. And then after that, really see what happens. And it's always fascinating to see how things shift and change in our lives when we kind of really empower our intentions with some sort of process or some sort of deeper work.